Thanks again for having me. This talk is basically going to cover some recent work that we've been doing associated with bioretention systems. And the story goes way back. In reality, this is a great problem to have. If we're thinking about optimizing bioretention systems, it means we're implementing them. So I want to caveat this discussion with that. You know, certainly, I think our research conclusively has pointed out that bioretentions on the whole, from a water quality perspective, outperform many other conventional practices. And I think we really have to be careful about keeping those objectives in mind because they change, right? If you're in an urban area, maybe you don't have the space for a gravel wetland, and you have a lot more maybe loading, and you're working in more of a confined space. The objectives are always changing. If we're considering chloride, for instance, as a pollutant, which we do a lot in the Northeast with our winters, it takes a different strategy altogether itself, and there aren't many BMPs that address chloride. So a lot of these things, depending on what your final objectives are, could completely switch. In this case, trying to get the technology to work. There we go. Of course, sorry, I should thank my other collaborators on this, Dr. Tom Ballestero, Yulia Barbu, who was the research student on this, Robin Stone, that did some of the research that was a predecessor to this. Let me just skip through this. Where this all really started was when we started to look at the data. And this chart, this is one of our $1 million charts. This is about eight years of data. It's somewhere around 60,000 data points, event mean concentrations for various storms across a range of different treatment systems. And this is looking at dissolved inorganic nitrogen, so the bioavailable form of nitrogen that causes eutrophication, especially in coastal areas. And this was where we first began to identify that we have kind of an optimization issue, or we have a design issue if our target is nitrogen. So you can probably detect without much effort that this graphic is highly underpopulated. You have a couple of systems that are doing really good removal efficiencies. I should say on the vertical axis here, you have a removal efficiency, and on the horizontal axis, a range of different systems. From what I call conventional systems, your swales, ponds, to a range of different manufactured treatment devices, to LID systems. And you can see, even in the world of bioretention, this is an average of 4. We had a range of performance from didn't do anything at all to did variably well. But it means that if we're concerned about nitrogen, then we need to start to reconsider the design of these particular systems to include the unit operations and unit processes that specifically address nitrogen. For phosphorus, it looks a little bit better, but again, if we're concerned about phosphorus like we would be maybe in inland freshwater lakes, we have a gap with respect to conventional systems. But even amongst the LID systems, we don't have great performance. And again, bioretention systems, if you look throughout the literature, we can go back in the 1980s where they were saying, 60 to 80% phosphorus reduction, total phosphorus reduction. We just don't see that at all. And that's for a variety of reasons. So we started to incorporate unit operations and unit processes. So we're ripping a page out of the textbook of the wastewater, drinking water industry. And really, it's kind of interesting because we live in the world of many different devices. And it can get kind of confusing, especially, there's a lot of manufacturers. There's very clever names. There's like the Stormtrooper, the Downstream Defender. I mean, these are all sort of interesting names, but they don't necessarily reveal what that system does. Even a bioretention system, you would assume that you have permanent retention of something in the biomass. And we know that that's part of it. Certainly without maintenance, those temporarily retained nutrients unretain themselves. They remobilize. So, by looking at the unit operations, unit processes that these systems employ, it gives us a better predictor of what their final performance is going to be. And the reality is, a lot of our systems, bioretention system, it might include some vegetative uptake, so retention in the biomass. It might include filtration, and and then some biological processes as well. Some of the early studies we did when we were taking lots and lots of samples as we developed these very busy, this is to impress you with the enormous giant data sets that we're building. Well, the thing that you can take away from this particular graph is these are normalized. We normalized the cumulative mass per pollutant and the cumulative volume of water, and so this is a first flush weighted graph. So the further the bar is to, I guess you'd say the left, the more first flush weighted it is. Typically we call a pollutant first flush weighted when 80% of the mass is mobilized and 20% of the storm. And why is this important? Well, this has everything to do with when that particular pollutant is being mobilized. We still don't really know why we size systems from a water quality perspective for an 1-inch rainstorm. We don't necessarily know why. It's maybe it goes back to, well, it was a convenient number. We take a 90. We can't do the 100-year storm, but how about the 90 percentile storm? And that in most places in the country that comes out to about an inch. Certainly there's some variability, but why is that? Well, that might change depending on the type of pollutant we're concerned with. Here, if we look at nitrogen, which is the dotted red line, we can see this is highly, highly first flush weighted. And so when we're doing urban retrofits, and particularly if we have nitrogen impairments, the question becomes, do we have to do an inch? Do we get a benefit if we can only treat 0.2 inches? And I think the early indications are it would be a benefit. So if you can't do an inch and you can only do 0.2 of an inch, there could be some real gains. And we're working with EPA and the Office of Research and Development to tease that out right now, because there's certain urban areas that really are challenged with respect to space. So if all of our pollutant mass is mobilizing in the first couple 0.2 of an inch of rain, then maybe sizing these systems for a smaller water quality volume will give us some benefit. So when we began to look across, this is the same data you saw earlier. This is including a different bioretention systems, and then we included a subsurface gravel wetland system as well. This is called a treatment effects plot. So essentially we just have we compare influent concentration to effluent concentration. The dotted, the line up the middle is the no impact line. So if points are falling on that, then influent and effluent concentrations are the same. If points are rising above it, it means that you have at least indications of export. So these are individual storm events over a range of time. If the points are falling below it, you have some element of removal. And so the key here is we see in bioretention systems, we see a lot of export. And in our gravel wetland system, we actually see a lot of removal with respect to phosphorus. And so our thought was, well, can we make a bioretention system more like a gravel wetland system? And what are the things, the unit processes within the gravel wetland system that's doing the pollutant removal? And it's a different story if you're concerned about nitrogen or you're concerned about phosphorus. For phosphorus, it's absorption to organic matter. You have some vegetative uptake. That's the relatively temporary storage, but you do have binding with the soils as well, provided you have some organic material that have absorption sites for phosphorus. We know that has a capacity. We oftentimes see systems remove phosphorus really well if we study them for 4 months. But if we study them for 4 years, once that absorptive capacity is met, there's no more unless you're finding ways to regenerate it. For nitrogen, it's a different game. You have some vegetative uptake. The vegetation are really important, but dissolved nitrogen moves through systems relatively fast. It's relatively conservative. The plants aren't necessarily sucking dissolved nitrogen up by a straw. They really need a mature environment and retention time to really act on on that. But then the game changer really is the anaerobic anaerobiosis. So in the wastewater treatment, what do? In tertiary treatment, we digest it, we make conditions anaerobic, and the bugs go crazy. They're happy. They don't charge overtime. They replicate. They double and triple their sizes in minutes, and we see that the biological, the microorganism contribution here is potentially game changing. So what do? We want to begin to develop specifications for including these unit processes within our systems. And the question, of course, is, well, how do we do that? Essentially, where we started is the system that we knew that worked. And this particular project was split up into 3 phases. The first phase, we wanted to look at nitrogen removal. And we knew that developing an internal storage reservoir within our system that could go anaerobic really influenced or increased nitrogen removal efficiency. In our gravel wetland system, we didn't know quite exactly what we should be measuring as far as design, and so we developed a ratio. It's the water quality volume to the internal storage reservoir volume ratio, and that came out to be about 26%. So our internal storage reservoir was about 26% of the volume of our water quality volume. We had that was our storage, and we knew that worked. And so we wanted to measure multiple iterations. If we increase that to 100%, what does that give us a added benefit for nitrogen reduction? And then the other thing we wanted to play with is retention time, because we know that retention time has a lot to do with nitrogen removal. So we looked at 2 different retention times, a 12-hour and a 30-hour. And so we ran synthetic stormwater through columns, and we had I think the next slide shows you what the setup. This is the setup. We had airtight columns that were mimicking the internal storage reservoir, and we altered not only the water quality volume or that ISR, the ISR to WQV ratio from 25% all the way up to 100%, but we also altered we did a 12-hour drain time and a 30-hour drain time. So these are the results. I'm not going to go into the anatomy of a box and whisker plot. It's really, really interesting, but this is showing you the full spread of the data. Really, it's the middle line, which is the median. That's probably the best thing to key into. And you see we have our influent. We were loading at about 2 milligrams per liter. And then we had a control, which was just a system that did not have an anaerobic, an internal storage reservoir. And you can see a broad range of performance, but you don't really see a gain with respect to increasing the internal storage reservoir. So when we go from 25% to 100%, we don't really see a marginal gain in performance. Where the game changer is really in the retention time. So when we go from even a 12-hour retention time at 100% of the water quality volume, we get a better performance if we just do a quarter at 30 hours. So the take-home is really, it's that retention time probably that's the dominant factor. And if we can make these systems hold water back longer, we can probably drive up the nitrogen reduction. That said, we're now trying to push this down. We know 25% works, and now we're working with EPA to say, well, what if we can do 10%? What if we only have that much space because we're in an urban area? Do we get a benefit, or do we see a penalty? If we look at that another way, this data just basically shows that it's we have the same kind of plot here over time. Over the internal storage reservoir to water quality volume ratio, and you can just see you get the real difference is you don't get much change with retention time here. The difference is not the size of the reservoir, but the time and the retention. So the next phase we really wanted to start looking at is phosphorus. And there's been a lot of research out there using different soil amendments to drive up the phosphorus. Typically, it involves some type of amendment with some type of iron, something that would be charged and increase the absorptive capacity of the soil. So we looked at 4 different media amendments. We took our typical bioretention soil mix, that's what BSM is, and we amended it with a water treatment residual. So this is a polyaluminum chloride taken from a drinking water treatment plant. We have infinite access to this. It's a waste product. Our university actually pays to get rid of it. So when we go over and we want to take some, they say have at it. So that's a relatively free material. Really, the science is how to process it. It's about 99.9% water, and it's taking that water out. It's sort of like a colloidal suspension. It's like Jello. So imagine trying to reconstitute the powder from after you made Jello. That's kind of what it's like. So there's a processing thing that we have to master. Well, we looked at water treatment residual additions at 5% by volume and 10% by volume, and then we look at iron filings. And then we looked at slag and limestone, just as a way to increase the cation exchange capacity of the media and find out if we could receive a benefit with respect to phosphorus absorption capacity. Here are the results. Again, our friend, the box and whisker plots, it's really, really clear from this particular chart. We were loading this at about 600 micrograms per liter. And you can see our influent on the far right, and then our control really did nothing. So just running it through a typical soil did nothing, and that soil did have some compost, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. You can see though, I think, yeah, really the promising thing is the use of the WTR or the iron filings. The slag and the limestone really don't show a benefit here. So we're focusing on these systems. Again, one we have for free. We can process it, and we can. And the other one, I mean, there are plenty of sources of the iron filings. We wanted to look at that over time as well. So this is the simulated storms that we did, and you can see. I mean, these systems are with the slag and the limestone. These systems are with the WTR and the iron filings. And what we are really looking for is there an absorptive capacity issue as we go out? And it really doesn't look like there is. There's a slight. Yeah, they're pretty even. So we're not necessarily losing absorptive capacity at least within this study. There was a previous study that we had done with columns that were looking at loading like a 20-year phosphorus load, and with the WTR at 5% of the bioretention soil mix by volume, we didn't see breakthrough after a 20-year loading cycle or a 20-year loading amount. So that's another study that was completed by Robin Stone, who received her master's degree with us. So the next thing we wanted to do is, and this was actually funded by Stantec. They wanted us to evaluate their bioretention soil mix that they were using all over. And the real difference between their specification and ours was their use of loam. Our spec at the time was a 60% sand, 20% wood chips, 10% loam, and a 10% leafy compost. So what we had considered a low phosphorus compost. But one thing I should say, and caution everything from here forward, these terms don't have specifications with them, right? I say compost, that's a big range of things. And this is one of the problems that we're dealing with as we get into this. I mean, we're looking at this under a microscope, but when I go to a contractor and I say, can you mix me up some bioretention soil mix? It's like, sure, what's in it? Loam, sand, compost, wood chips. I mean, that's all That's all readily available, but it means very, very different things. I'm thinking about particle size distributions. I'm thinking about all types of, analyses to help specify what we want. They're like, oh yeah, I got some compost in the back. I got some topsoil from the other job that I did. And we don't know where these things are coming from. And I think the more we can, I'm not saying that we need specifications or you need to hire a lab to do particle size distributions for all your soil media, but I think we should start with our objectives, and we should try to make the selection of materials a little bit more uniform. So one of the interesting things is we started to adjust the loam, we started to adjust the sand, and it looks like the loam really does a really good job. So without even the modification here with the water treatment residuals, we're seeing a 90% loam and a 10% sand mix do very well. In fact, that loam mix all the way up to a 40-50 or like 45-55 do very well, almost as good as the amended soils. Now the trick here is, this is great in a column, but the infiltration capacities of these different soils were dramatically different. This didn't really pass water. So here, and we had to shrink the size of the column, and we had to just so we could move it through. It was moving through at about, I would say, probably 0.25 or a half an inch an hour, maybe. These systems are moving at about, with the more sand, moving at about 30 to 40 inches an hour, probably. So here again, we're confronting our design objectives. In a highly urban area, I'm not really comfortable with this. As a backyard rain garden, right, that is just taking some rooftop runoff, I'm very comfortable with this. So, it all goes back, I think, to the objectives. But one of the great things, I'll skip over this, is that we're able with amendments to get the same performance with a much higher porosity system, at least for phosphorus. So the conclusions, they're somewhat obvious. Obviously, we found that compost is actually a source of nutrients. So if you're worried about dissolved nutrients and you're putting compost in your system, it's really a problem. You can have export of both nitrogen and phosphorus from compost systems. We know that filters are superior at sediment removal, and we know that also the hydraulic loading ratio, the treatment area to surface area of your filter, it has a lot to do with, I guess, the amount of sorptive capacity with respect to phosphorus. The promising is we can modify these systems and get great performance, 60 to 90% for DIN and phosphorus removal by doing some of these amendments. And then we're just experimenting with how small can we go. Loam has excellent sorptive capacity. So the more we can incorporate that, if we can cut out the compost and include the loam, we found that it gives us enough organic material to sustain the vegetation, and that it's a good replacement. So now we're looking at more like a 50% sand, maybe 20% loam, 20% wood chips, and then 5 or 10% of media amendment. The curious, I think, are details regarding the bioretention soil mix and just this broad range of what is compost. One person's compost is, we go to one city that I won't mention their name, but what they call compost is the sludge from their wastewater treatment plant that they heat up to 180 degrees, and they give us that. We're like, yeah, this is not compost. So that's just an exaggerated effect. And if optimal removal efficiencies are to be achieved, we really need to fine-tune these systems to the removal objectives of the watershed. And we have to maintain them as well. One of the things we found was that, again, as a unit process, vegetative uptake is a temporary storage. So if we're not maintaining that, especially in the winter when those plants die and senesce and start to decay, they're going to reintroduce an organically bound nutrient back into an organic form. Sorry, I had to put Curious George. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. We love Curious George. It's a cartoon I love to let them watch. And they actually have an episode, and I was just flabbergasted, sitting that tracks stormwater from the street through the water treatment plant, and it was a combined sewer overflow, and then to the sea. I was just really, really amazed that this is all detailed. If you want to know more, or you want to direct anybody to the intricacies of stormwater and combined sewer overflows, you can direct them to this Curious George episode.